Last week, his name is Jason Kirk. He wrote an article called "The Big 12's Expansion List Should Be BYU and Then Whoever Else." Among several articles about Big 12 expansion and BYU, he's the college football editor for SB Nation. Jason, welcome to BYU Sports Nation.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me.
What's it like right now? As normally the end of July is a little bit slow, but things are pretty interesting with the Big 12 expansion talk, I imagine, in your neck of the woods, as it is with us.
Yeah, we kind of missed it. This off season was, we sort of got used to expansion talk being kind of the off season filler, and we didn't really have it for a couple months there. It kind of looked like just idle speculation, and then the Big 12 officially threw the doors open, and now it's back at full blast, which is pretty nice in July.
So what prompted this article? As we mentioned, the Big 12's expansion list should be BYU and then whoever else. Obviously, you think highly of BYU. Cougar fans love to hear it. What prompted you to go this direction?
Well, we looked at sort of the numbers that the Big 12 has, not exactly the numbers, but at least the criteria that the Big 12 has stated that it's taking a look at, and we don't know the exact metrics it's using. But we know that it's athletic department quality, media market, fan base, academics are the main things that could actually be calculated. So we looked at a few numbers related to those things, and I mean, BYU just jumps out. In football history, it is no contest between BYU and basically everyone else. None of these others has a national championship or a Heisman. In recent football quality, you could make a case that Houston had one very good season. Cincinnati had a very good season. But BYU year over year is just more solid. In terms of fan base, the attendance, it's no contest, not only at home, but also what BYU would bring on the road. Large alumni bases in Dallas and Houston and Kansas City, basically all throughout the Big 12. And academics, I mean, it's just across the board, BYU just jumped out as number one to me. Media markets would be one of the two arguments against Salt Lake, obviously a smaller town, but BYU has fans in Phoenix, fans all around Texas. So I think that balances out a little bit. Plus, we don't really know if media markets is quite as important as it seemed to be during the opening wave of this realignment thing back in 2010, 2011. With the fall of cable TV to some degree. And the other thing would be the distance, but to me, if you go and add West Virginia, you don't really get to complain about distance anymore. You probably just find yourself.
Jason Kirk of SB Nation is on BYU Sports Nation. Does BYU's independent status and its ability to immediately jump into the conference favor them in any way so that they don't have this AAC 27-month, $10 million, million per month deal that would have to be figured out?
Perhaps. The Big 12 has a lot of money, and if it came down to them needing to help out whoever they wanted at the conference, it could sway things. If you want someone in your league by 2017 or 2018, which, one of those two would be what they'd want. They wouldn't want to wait till 2019 till somebody could afford to get in. Could be a factor. You'd like to hope they have longer-term thinking, and something like getting a team in 1 year sooner wouldn't make that much difference. But it's a thing to consider, and the independents not having to possibly deal with a lawsuit like West Virginia did in order to get into the Big 12, or any number of other things, or, forfeited revenue, could be a factor. BYU is obviously the most flexible in that regard.
The Big 12 expansion has been a discussion for a very long time, and BYU has always been mentioned. But since this news officially broke 5 days ago, what do you think the perception of BYU is relative to the Big 12, in your opinion, after these past 5 days?
I think it should be high. Obviously, Houston has risen because of the support from basically every important person in Texas government and the University of Texas itself, which is very surprising. And there's backroom stuff going on there, which, it's Texas. There always will be. If y'all get into the Big 12, that's what you're getting into, by the way. So
yeah, exactly.
Have fun with that. But, so Houston's probably rising. I think most people have Cincinnati right around that top tier as well. If they were to add two teams, I think most people would expect Cincinnati and Houston to have very, very, very good chances. But to me, if BYU is not in that mix in the national consciousness, it's, probably just because there's been a lot of Houston headlines. Maybe Houston just made more noise over the past few days. So I don't know if I would judge it based on just that. I think if people, sit down and analyze everything, I think it's pretty clear that BYU is one of the two best choices.
He's Jason Kirk. He writes for SB Nation. He's a college football editor. What would your reaction be if BYU wasn't invited to the Big 12?
It would be a little confusing. They've said they might expand to 4 teams. If BYU wasn't included in that group, that would be basically baffling. If they go and add Houston, Cincinnati, Memphis, UConn, if BYU didn't make a 4-team cut, that would be very perplexing. If it was a 2-team kind of thing, then it's okay. Well, Houston's nearby, that saves on travel. Texas made a deal with Houston, and if Cincinnati's the other team, well, Cincinnati's a pretty good candidate as well, and you get into Ohio, and it's not that far, travel partner for West Virginia. If it's 2 teams and it's Houston and Cincinnati, not that outrageous. I would think it's a mistake, but there are reasonable arguments for Houston and Cincinnati.
What makes more sense, 2 or 4 teams for the Big 12 to use in expansion?
I think with the way media is going forward, 4 teams could make a lot of sense. I think if we were still definitely under the cable TV media market's math, you'd say 2 because then you get your conference championship game that makes money without cutting up the pie too many ways. Obviously, an argument against, say, Houston is they do not bring a lot of revenue to the table. But we don't really know how media is going to work in 10 years and 20 years. So to me, just bring on all the decent teams you can. I think, in my opinion, you have BYU, Houston, Cincinnati. Then you have a bunch of options that are just decent. Any of them are fine. Sure, just grab one to throw in there. But in my opinion, I think go big here. The SEC, ACC, Big Ten, there are 14 teams. Sure, match that. They're all better than Iowa State, and you already have them, so you can't exactly do any more damage here.
Regardless of who they go with and what direction they go with 2 or 4, when do you think the Big 12 actually does something on this? When do they make a move?
My colleague Stephen Godfrey put up a story today, mostly about Houston, that according to his reporting, 2 schools that are in contention, officials there believe the window for evaluation is between 60 and 90 days, which would put us right in the middle of the football season, which means a good start by these teams could be very important because obviously you don't want to add a team that's 1-4 or whatever. But yeah, at that point, all bets are off. Any guess is as good as any. It could take 5 years. Who knows? This is the Big 12. I would never bet on anything. But as far as we know, the Big 12 will at least have its information lined up within the next 2 or 3 months. As for when the decision comes, no telling.
Let's get crazy a little bit. What if Oklahoma decides, at some point they want to bounce, or soon that Colorado's like, oh, we would actually rather go to the Big 12. Could any kind of scenario like that blow up what the Big 12 is hoping to do, which is kind of salvage the conference?
If we're talking about could the Big 12 blow up in any number of spectacular ways, the answer is always yes. As we know, and as Oklahoma has admitted at 2 different points at least, it almost left for the Pac-12 over the past 5 or 6 years. We know Texas did as well. We know Colorado did. We know Baylor tried to. Oklahoma State and Texas Tech would have gone along. Texas A&M and Missouri left for the SEC. Nebraska has no regrets about leaving. Any number of things, disastrous things could happen. I believe Oklahoma's president has mentioned a couple times that the Big Ten and SEC are sort of always options for Oklahoma. I'm not sure. I can't recall off the top of my head exactly how explicitly he laid that out publicly, but any conference would take Oklahoma. If things start to go south, if Oklahoma doesn't like the way things go, Oklahoma can leave without any problem at all. Same for Texas. So yeah, and as far as Colorado coming back, Kansas State head coach Bill Snyder said a few days ago that he knows of a school or 2 that want back in, which is probably wishful thinking. But if Colorado came back, you could defend it. I mean, they'd be making about the same amount of money, joining a conference with at least some upside. The Pac-12 is basically maxed out as far as money goes. And, this is where they're from. Texas recruiting, California recruiting's nice, but you always miss Texas recruiting. So if Colorado were to come back, it wouldn't be indefensible. I don't think it'll happen, but Sure, it's the Big 12. Anything can happen.
That's the new theme, I think, for this upcoming year. Anything can happen. Once you're champion, anything can happen. When we look at the expansion candidates, they're all Group of 5 or independent. Are there any potential Power 5s, Colorado namely, that we're missing in this, that maybe out of the blue would actually throw a wrinkle into this conversation?
A lot of people speculate that Arizona and or Arizona State could be on the table. I don't believe we've ever seen anything concrete or specific or credible there, but they're close. They would be better gets than, UCF or whatever. They'd certainly boost your conference. I think those are the only ones I've seen as far as Power 5 teams that might jump in this round, at least. Of course, in the last round, FSU wanted into the Big 12 because it didn't like the ACC's TV money, and now the Big 12 is expanding because it wants the ACC's TV money. So life comes at you fast.
Jason, we appreciate the time. Great stuff. We'll continue to watch your work on SB Nation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Jason Kirk on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Deseret First, your values, your timeline, your financial future.